We'll start back up here in Pullman, and everything I think is looking good on our side. Do all the participants at the remote sites, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
I see some head nodding.
In Tri-Cities.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tri-Cities. Thank you, Everett.
Yep. We're okay in Spokane.
Thank you, Spokane. So my name is Rob Baker. I'm going to do a quick introduction for Blackboard Collaborate, a web conferencing tool. I get to oversee the implementation of that solution here at WSU, and some of you probably are familiar with that. We've had it on campus here since 2009. It first came here under the name Illuminate, and over those 7-8 years or so, it has evolved to meet our growing demands in many, many ways. The most recent update that we introduced in fall was the Ultra experience of it, which is a new quick launching browser-based experience with a nice intuitive layout for the user. And they have a current monthly update schedule, and since they're tailored towards higher education, many of the features they introduce are specific to courses and things that will help. Things that they do are breakout rooms, polling, live user feedback, interactive content boards. It really is, of all the web conferencing tools out there, the best one I've seen tailored directly to higher education. Also, being directly available via a link in the Learn course space means that users, whether you're a student or instructor, can join very quickly. So we've seen Collaborate used in a variety of ways here at WSU. Last semester, we had over 400 unique reoccurring virtual meeting rooms, and those hosted over 13,000 total participants for a total use time of 11,887 hours. And those are only for the Learn course spaces. We actually have use that is not Learn-based as well that I'll go into. For the Learn-based ones, many of these are global campus courses, and that allows both real-time interaction as well as students to access lectures recordings. And some students, because of the needs of a job or anything else, aren't able to attend live, so they can watch those recordings later and interact as needed via office hours. And even students that did attend live, that gives them a chance to review the lectures later. So AOI also uses Collaborate in our Global Connections program, and that offers extracurricular activities to our global campus students. We've hosted events such as guided breathing techniques and interactive tutorials on creating effective LinkedIn accounts to help provide opportunities for the student body to interact with each other, even though they're spread across the state or even the globe. Another way we like to use it is for courses that are based here in Pullman. That will allow remote speakers to come and do a talk or a presentation even though they don't have to travel here. Pullman has somewhat of a unique, isolated geographic location, so being able to bring in professionals from a variety of fields is very helpful for that overall student experience. I've helped host wide-ranging ones going all the way from people within the social services field to NASA to come here to Pullman to speak, no airfare required. And outside of courses, Collaborate is also used for hosting webinars. Two of the ones that we've done recently have been a continuing education course for the College of Vet Med, where they had graduates in veterinary medicine have continuing education course credits earned. And another one that we did recently was the Institute of Biological Chemistry holding a global nitrogen symposium. And this one was held over the course of 2 days and featured 9 speakers from 6 countries. Not only was WSU represented, we also had Edinburgh, Stockholm, Nairobi, Madrid, the Netherlands, and more. And that reached over 100 viewers per day for the 2 days. You know, with the multitude of web conferencing solutions available, the one constant that we've had here at WSU has been Collaborate. And with their drive to regularly introduce new features, we're feeling good that they are well suited to meet our needs as they evolve. So again, my name is Rob Baker. If anyone would like to reach out for any further questions on Collaborate, please feel free to email me at rob.baker@wsu.edu. Thank you.
And I am a faculty member here on campus in the Center for Transformational Learning and Leadership. And we've been using Blackboard Collaborate in an online class I've been teaching, for about 8 years, probably since it came on campus. I think we were one of the first users of Blackboard Collaborate. So I want to talk a little bit about how we use it in this course, and show some ways and some features within Blackboard Collaborate that we use on a pretty consistent basis. So the course that I teach is an communication and life skills course. So it's about interpersonal communication. So my students come together, and we have 30 students in the class, and they come together from all over the place, all walks of life, all over the globe. And we actually meet every week with these students for a 2-hour session. So either usually in the evening times, that's what we have found works best for our online students. And we use this as an opportunity to have what we call a lab. So the class is a 4-credit class. It has a lab component to it. So this meeting time every week is what we consider to be their lab. So we use Blackboard Collaborate for that. And really the reason that we started using Blackboard Collaborate specifically with this class has to go back to some of the learning outcomes that we were striving for our students. So it's a communications course, so we wanted to give our students an opportunity to practice the communication that they are learning about in their class in a real life, real time opportunity with students who are also learning those same skills. So having them come together on a week-to-week basis and practice these skills together was one way we could create that environment for them. We also wanted to give our students a way to build community. In online classes, they use a lot of threaded discussions and asynchronous ways of connecting, which are great resources. And sometimes students feel a little isolated. So being able to come together in a real-time, synchronous place, they are able to start to get to know their classmates. They can start to build community with these people who may live geographically in very different places than themselves. And what we do to do all of that is we have our students work on a community service project for the whole semester. So all 30 of them are working on the same project, and they are working towards some sort of outcome towards the end of the semester. So we've had students do all kinds of things from putting on like a fun run to adopting a food bank to putting together packages for military families, all kinds of things. But what they use that 2-hour meeting for, in addition to practicing the course concepts, is planning and executing this community service project. So the basic structure of our 2-hour session together pretty much follows the same thing all semester. We use it as a way to give announcements about what's happening in the class, also to answer any questions students have about upcoming assignments or things that they're working on outside of this 2-hour lab. So if they're struggling with an assignment or they just don't quite get why we're doing something, this is an opportunity for them to ask that question to their classmates and also to instructor. We talk about course content, so the information that they're getting within the course through videos and written content, we then can kind of bring alive in this session. So sometimes we're doing experiential activities around these different concepts. Sometimes we're just asking about where have you noticed it in your life and how has it worked for you. An example of that, we talk about active listening in this class, and then we challenge them to practice that with a relationship in their own lives. So then we bring them back together and we say, how did that go? You had this opportunity to practice active listening with somebody. What was that like for you? And then we also use it, like I said, for the planning and implementation of the group community service project. So they can come together and say, okay, this is what we need to do. This is what we have done. These are the next steps kind of thing for their project. And all of this is guided by the instructor who comes in every week with a plan of what needs to happen. And the first 6 weeks of the class are pretty much largely the instructor talking to the students, engaging with them in different activities, talking about course content, those kinds of things. And then at week 6 is when the community service project really kind of kicks into high gear, and the students actually start leading part of the meeting at that point in time. So we've taken this group of 30 students and we break them into either pairs or groups of 3. And in those pairs or groups of 3, they lead a portion of the meeting or a portion of the class that has to do with the community service project. So we're having the students be responsible for making the progress in their community service project, both outside of this 2-hour meeting and inside the 2-hour meeting. So they need to come in prepared, knowing what the class has done up until that point, knowing what the next steps in the class project are, and helping guide their fellow students moving forward. So this kind of gives a lot of interaction and a lot of opportunity for our students to step up and take some responsibility and some leadership within the course, where the instructor really gets to be the guide. The instructor gets to ask the questions that they haven't thought of yet, offer advice for things that maybe they've seen in the past that these students wouldn't be privy to, ensure that they're applying the course concepts and how they're having these conversations and how they're moving forward with their group project, while the students are the ones speaking on the meeting space, running the whiteboard, uploading PowerPoints, all of that kind of stuff. So it gives our students an opportunity to see what it's like to lead in this form of technology or this form of meeting. When we first started doing this, like I said, we've been doing this for a long time. When we first started doing this, many of our students had never been on a web conferencing before, so this was brand new to them, and they didn't know how to do it, and it was confusing, and most of our first meeting was just setting up how do you even get on, how do you use the space, all of those kinds of things. Fast forward now, 8 years later, and our students, most of them have used web conferencing before. Most of them, this is really intuitive to them. They understand how it operates. So that's really fun to see that change. We also think it's really important to start talking about how do you work as a group in a web conferencing setting, because this is becoming a reality of how we do work nowadays, just like Rob was talking about these symposiums of people coming together from all over the globe. This is how we operate in our world of technology. So how do we do this well, and how do we talk about this as a form of communication, since this is a communications course? So just that's a little bit of background about why we use Collaborate and how we use it on a day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the space itself, the Blackboard Collaborate space. So when students first join the Blackboard space, what they often see is a blank white page, or what we call the whiteboard, unless there's a PowerPoint already uploaded there, and that's usually what we use as a PowerPoint. And so when they get into the course space, there'll be a PowerPoint slide in front of them. Usually says welcome, the date, and kind of what we're going to be doing that day. And as they come into the room, over on the side, there's a list of participants. So we see who's joined the room. We have their name. We know that they're present in the room that day for us, and so we can engage with those people. We use the chat function quite often. That's the main way that our students communicate during the meeting with each other and with us, is through the chat function. So they're using the chat function, and as an instructor, I would say one of the challenging pieces is, as I'm talking to my students using the microphone, they're using the chat. And so keeping up on what they're saying while I'm also speaking can sometimes be a challenge. But it is good for them to have a way to engage in the conversation. Students can use a microphone, and we do request that our students come into the class with a microphone ready to go. So in our supply list for the semester, we write that down as one of their required supplies they need to have. In addition to the textbook, they need to have a headset. We ask them to actually have headset and microphone, so that if they're meeting at their house or in a public location, they're the only people who hear what's happening in the meeting, and they can speak with the microphone. So our students do use the microphone function, not as often as maybe we would like them to, but they do use it. So that's something that we've found to be very helpful. A couple other features that we use a lot in Blackboard Collaborate are the breakout rooms. And these, basically what these do is students can go into a separate space or a separate room with a smaller group of students and have a conversation with just those people. So you can have multiple conversations happening at one time. So we will often break them into these breakout rooms with their small groups, with either their partner or their group of 3 that they're working with for the semester, and have them have conversations with just those people rather than with the whole group of 30. This really encourages student engagement. It's easy to hide in a group of 30 on a web conferencing call. It's not so easy to hide in a group of 3 or 4. They need to be more engaged. They need to actually participate in order to get the most out of the class. So in the breakout rooms, we can set it up that the instructor is the person who sends them into the breakout rooms or puts them in the room they want them in, or you can set it up that students can do it themselves. And since our students meet every week, they get pretty savvy in using Blackboard Collaborate, so they usually put themselves into the breakout rooms. Then as an instructor, I can go into any of those breakout rooms while they're having their conversations. So I can pose a question to them as an entire group, put them into breakout rooms, and then I can go in and out of each of those rooms and kind of check in on how their conversation is going, make sure that they're on the right track, answer any questions that they have, those kinds of things within those rooms. If a student either in the large, when we're all together in one room, or they're in the breakout rooms, has a question, on Blackboard Collaborate, they can also raise their hand. So they just have to simply raise put an icon that has a little hand. They click on it. It shows me that they've raised their hand. And then I can know, okay, that person has a question. I can either call on them. Okay, Jennifer, I see you have a question. What is your question? Or if it's a breakout room, I can go into that breakout room and find out what their question is. So there's a way for them to get my attention when we're in the session together and when we're moving through things together. So that's a really cool feature that I like a lot. Another feature in here that we use is the polling feature. So we'll ask a question and try to get a vibe from all 30 people to see where they're at. So the polling is you can have responses of yes, no, or no response. And so oftentimes I'll ask a question to make sure that everybody understands something or likes a decision about their community service project or something like that. And so I'll ask them to put a yes or a no. If they don't respond, I can see that. So if you put yes, it puts a green check mark next to your name. And if you put no, it puts a red X next to your name. And so I can see that 5 people haven't responded. And so I can ask those people specifically, hey, I noticed you haven't responded to the poll. Can you please do so? So I can see where we're at. It also gives us a total at the top. So you can see like no people have said yes and 1 person has said no. So I can kind of keep track. If I know there's 30 people there, make sure that there's 30 people who have responded. This allows me to engage the students, make sure that they're paying attention, make sure that they're on the same page as me, and to make sure that they are understanding what we're talking about in the group. So those are some of the features we use a lot. Probably breakout rooms and polls we probably use almost every day, and the chat obviously we use every day too. We use document sharing a little bit, so if there's something we can't upload onto the Blackboard space, so if it's a PowerPoint, you can put it up there. But if we have a document we need to share with our students, we can do that as well. So we can send documents to everybody in the meeting at the same time. They can access it, we can talk about it, and move forward as a group. Those are kind of the ones that we use on really often. The whiteboard and this white sheet on the front here, students can also have access to write on that. So sometimes I'll ask them a question and they'll just write their response directly on the whiteboard so I can see all of those collective responses in one place. That is anonymous. I don't know who's writing what. So if you wanted to know, you would want to ask them to put their name on it or have them do it via chat so you could see who it was associated with. But on the whiteboard, there's no way to know that for sure. So I use that sometimes just as to get a feel for where students are with something. Trying to think if there's anything else that we do pretty often. One of the concerns that people have often said to me when we talk about this idea of using Blackboard Collaborate, especially with a group of 30, is, are the students engaged? do they actually, or do they just like log on and then get on their Facebooks and check out and not be engaged in the class? And I would say in our experience, students are very consistent in their engagement and they're highly involved. And part of that is because they get to know each other, so they will talk to each other and bring each other into the conversation. But also the way that we use the polling and the breakout rooms and the whiteboard makes it pretty hard for somebody to not be engaged. And since we know who's not polling or who's not chatting, we can often call on that student and get them re-engaged if for some reason they got distracted. There's also a feature on here where if they need to walk away for a little bit, they need to put their child to bed or they need to take care of an emergency or something, they can actually put this icon that says away. And so we know that person stepped away for a moment and we know that that's why they're not engaging in the conversation for that time frame. But overall, our students are highly engaged. Part of what influences that, I believe, is the way that the instructor engages with them. We want to hear from students. We value their experience. We look at ourselves in this particular meeting as a facilitator of conversation, we don't use it as like a lecture. So I'm not getting on there and speaking at them. I'm asking them about their experiences. I'm asking them to take a leadership role in the meeting. And so if they don't speak or they don't contribute to the conversation, then the conversation doesn't happen. So in order to really make it effective, they need to be involved. The smaller groups is something that keeps them highly engaged. Like I said, it's hard to hide in a group of 3 or 4. It is easy to hide in a group of 30. So we try to use those small groups as much as possible. And then having the students lead the discussion has been really helpful as well. They respect their peers. Everybody gets an experience of leading that discussion, so they know what it feels like when they ask a question and nobody engages. They get an idea of how intimidating it can be for them to try to lead 25 or 26 other people through something. So when a student is leading, they tend to be really engaged. They want to give that respect and that attention to their peers. So having a lot of ownership on the students helps them stay more engaged in the class and in the process overall. Another thing that we've asked our students about over the years of doing this, like I said, we started probably when Blackboard Collaborate was new, how they like it, like what they think about having a synchronous meeting every week. It's a big time commitment, and the reason a lot of these students are global is because they're working full time, they have families, they have other things happening, and so making a commitment to be in a meeting every week can be a challenge for them. And our students have told us that they love the meetings, that they like the idea of coming together on a weekly basis. They feel connected to their peers in ways that they haven't felt in other classes. They really like the fact that us as instructors want to hear about their experiences and want to know how things are going in their own lives. And they often have often said that this is one of the best classes they've taken, and part of that is because of the online piece, the synchronous meeting piece of it. They are hesitant at first about the weekly meetings. They don't know if they can make them to the meetings. They don't know if they want to make that time commitment to be there every week. But once they do, they really enjoy them. They like coming to the meetings. We also record them, like Rob was saying, we can record these meetings. So we record them every week in case a student can't come. They need to work or they're in a completely opposite time zone than we are. We've had students take this class from Europe or from Africa, and it's hard to get on when it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and we would never ask somebody to do that. So they can watch the recordings and be involved in the class that way. We just ask that when they watch the recordings, they submit to us kind of like a summary of what the meeting was about to ensure that they're staying on the same page as all of their classmates, so that they can still be part of the overall process. And because it is a student project that they're working on throughout the semester, we want to ensure that all the students have equal opportunity or equal say in that project. So I think that's what I have for now. Yes.
All right, we good?
Rob Crossler.
Thank you. All right, good morning. My name is Rob Crossler. I'm an assistant professor of information systems in the Carson College of Business. And I've been at WSU now, this is my second semester, so I'm fairly new here, but I've been teaching distance courses for, as I was calculating this morning, about 6.5 to 7 years in various different ways. So what we'll see as we kind of go through this presentation, my agenda here is I'm going to set up the context of what I do, and it looks different than that previous presentation and how things are done. And that's what's great, I think, about distance education and the global approach is there's a lot of really cool ways that you can engage with students and that you can make the classroom experience best possible for them. And as I go through this, what you see with my agenda is I'm actually going to start talking about Skype, and then I'm going to go into Collaborate and how I've used that. And the reason why I'm talking about it this way is it's kind of the journey that I've been on of how I have tried to embrace technology to do the best I can possibly do for the students that I'm teaching. So hopefully you'll get to see that. So the class that I've taught distance primarily over the last 6.5, 7 years, I have taught some other ones, but it's been a database class. And the database class is very interesting in the sense that you have two aspects to it. One is very much teaching application skills. You could think of it like a programming class where students are learning how to write code, they're learning how to do data modeling, and actually applying skills that they're going to go out into the workforce and utilize. But behind that, you also have a theoretical component to it, an understanding of the why we're asking them to learn how to do what they're doing. And in that, there's some interesting challenges of how you engage them and do things a certain way, which I'll talk about. And the other thing about being at WSU that will kind of come out in this presentation is when I started this fall, I was given the task of take the class you teach in Pullman over 16 weeks, and for distance, condense it down to 7 weeks, having the exact same content, the exact same learning goals in that 7-week space, which is a challenge when you're learning something hard, but I embraced that. And we'll talk about that as how things are put together. But not only that, but put it together in such a way to where all the content that you create is completely reusable in future semesters, so it can scale, whether it is one class of 20 students or 20 classes of 20 students with different people overseeing that. Set it up in such a way to where it will work for others. So I'm not going to go into the technologies that I utilize to do that, but I will say that we have great people here at WSU who were very helpful in helping me put all of that together. So if you're faced with challenges with your distance classes, by all means, I can say the people here to help you do that are phenomenal. So as I went through and kind of through the training I've received and the practices and the experiences of teaching global, one of my thoughts is what are my goals? What am I really trying to do to be successful, to create the best possible course experience I can for students? And I ultimately came down to 3 primary goals. One is to have parallel learning outcomes for my face-to-face class as I'm doing on campus. And that doesn't necessarily mean always doing it the same way, but my way of getting there was asking myself, here's what I'm doing in the classroom to help students to learn this. Given that I'm not in the same room as people, how can I utilize technology in such a way to ensure that a student taking the class globally walks away with those exact same skills? And so you'll see that as I talk about how I've used these various different technologies. Also, I have a goal of removing distance barriers of students feeling disconnected. One of the things that I've picked up on is it's real easy if you're 300 miles away or 3,000 miles away, sometimes you feel like you're a number, you're not a person. So how can you break down those barriers in such a way to where, at least from my perspective, students feel like I care about them, I think of them as a person, as a student, and not just as a number or something that's just out there taking what I speak and doing something with it and turning something in. And the other thing I like to do is to make myself available. And what that's oftentimes meant is this isn't an 8 to 5 Monday through Friday job. So students are working that they're taking global classes. So I have to purposely make myself available outside of what might be the normal time frame that students in Pullman would expect me to be available. So trying to become purposeful about having certain times set aside and certain technologies available, so that way students, if they have questions, they don't feel like, man, I can never, I can never ask questions, I'm on my own. So making myself available. So one of the initial ways that I utilized technology is I started using Skype. And my primary reason for doing this is I wanted to have office hours, time where I was online and if students wanted to get in touch with me, they could log on, they could interact with me, and I was there. And this worked well. It allowed students to see me. They have webcam, I have webcam, and it broke down that barrier. It worked fairly well. What it also did, and one of the things I like about Skype and then also Collaborate, is the ability to share my screen. And it initially started with I would share my screen with, say, a place where I could type code and they could see it, or we could interact back and forth with some questions. But as I kind of put on my hat of how do I make this much, much more like the classroom, I thought about in the classroom, I have a whiteboard, and I oftentimes like to walk through how do you get to a solution by scribbling on a whiteboard. And I really felt like that was lost. Students were seeing, okay, here's the beginning problem, and oftentimes we'd get to the end of the problem, but the journey from point A to point B was lost on them, and in that, they didn't know how decisions were being made, how you ultimately decided to do one thing instead of another thing. And so I ultimately, as technology advanced, I was looking at as an iPad, can I write on an iPad and do some things with that? And that had some serious limitations. It didn't work well with Skype the way I wanted it to. It didn't play nicely with these other sorts of web conferencing tools at the time. And so I ultimately ended up getting a Surface Pro. The first one I had was a Surface Pro 3. I now use a Surface Pro 4. And what's great about that is I can write on the screen with a pen size that is like I am writing on a piece of paper. So as if a student's sitting in my office and I'm scribbling on paper and they're flowing with me through the process. So I started doing that, and it had some great usefulness in it. Let me go to this next slide. And this is something in an introductory sort of lecture that I created. And if you look at this picture, it's ugly. I admit it is not something that I would post and say, hey, here's the grand solution that you could come up with. But what we have here really is trying to talk to students about the relationships between entities. So real quick, a student could have one major, and a major would have many students. If we get into the nitty-gritty of that, that's not necessarily true. But for an in-class example, it's something students relate to. And there's aspects to this. So we have attributes of these tables. So we have their ID, their major, their names. These have different sizes of how they'll actually be stored in the database. And so a solution typed up very nicely in Visio would have these really pretty boxes with all these little labels, and how do you get there? And so what I did, and using Collaborate, and we talked about before, you can record what's going on in that Collaborate session, and I've used other technologies that have done that exact same thing. I can record the process of how I created this. And so the students who are present are there asking questions. They're there engaging with you as you are creating a solution. But not only that, that process of why did we draw this line? And as I was talking about drawing the line and what all these different markings on the line mean while I am doing them, that's all captured in a way that then a student who wasn't able to attend whatever session it was, or if it was during some office hours, oftentimes, as long as it's not a personal conversation, I'll record these virtual office hours so questions being asked by global students can then be shared with other people who have the same questions. My experience is usually if one person in the classroom has a question, there's 3 or 4 other people in there that wanted to ask the same question, they just didn't know it yet. And so by using these technologies of recording it and doing the process and being able to write on the screen, I've had students say, that is so phenomenal because I was struggling with the process. So this is the solution I found that utilized or took advantage of how to break down that barrier and how to do something about that. Going back to what I was using Skype for, and then we'll talk about Collaborate for a minute. I also found it was very useful for group meetings with students. So oftentimes I would require, as part of this class, a presentation where the students had to get in front of me if I were doing it in Pullman and give a presentation. Well, likewise, I could do the same thing with a group of students all coming into Skype and giving a presentation. Or as they're trying to hash out decisions that they were making, they could consult with me like I would with students that came into my office. And this is where I started to see some issues with using Skype and why I was really excited about moving into Collaborate. One, Skype has over the years changed their rules about how many people you can have in a group video chat. So that caused some consternation. Ultimately, I think I bought a professional Skype membership so I could host said meetings and I could get around that. I think since they've changed their rules. But another thing that I ran into with Skype is it requires every student to have Skype installed and working on their laptop. Inevitably, regardless if I had 12 students in a class or 30 students in a class, there was 1 or 2 students that I had to provide tech support for to get them to a point where they could Skype with me, which I was willing to do it. I thought it was very worthwhile that students felt that I had that level of engagement, but at the same time, I'm back there going, man, this really isn't the part of my job I should be spending my time doing. And so when I started using Collaborate, I jumped in and used it for the exact same things that I was using Skype for and found that a lot of those barriers were removed. So some of the advantages I found with Collaborate is it did automatically record. I've used a number of different softwares that I've plugged into Skype to record Skype sessions. It has worked, but I always felt like I was trying to kludge something together. Collaborate provided that opportunity for the interactions I was creating to be recorded, so that way students could do that. The other things I liked about it was it's available through Blackboard. So students go in, they log in, it's very easy for them to get in, and them getting in and getting connected was no longer a grand excuse that created a new set of challenges that I had to solve. And not only that, when there are issues, someone else, if Collaborate blows up, the university has resources and probably a relationship with somebody that takes care of those things. So again, it removes the responsibility and the burden on myself for doing things. So as I've used these various different technologies, I've come up with a few things that I refer to the keys to success that have made using Collaborate a successful tool. One is early on. So I'm teaching a 7-week class, which normally in a 16-week class, you have time to ramp things up and to get things going. 7 weeks, you don't have time to wait. So very early, very first couple of days of this 7-week period, I hold an initial introductory meeting using Collaborate. And it's the only mandatory synchronous point in the semester that I have, primarily because the class is supposed to stand on its own and not require synchronous creation of things. It's supposed to be in a nice package, and then your time as the instructor is spent interacting in more of an ad hoc fashion and grading and answering questions and doing that sort of stuff. But I really like having that initial introductory mandatory meeting where I introduce to my students who I am, the approach of the class, and also because it's done over 7 weeks, I reiterate probably for the third or fourth time that they would have received it, whether it was via email or syllabus or other pre-recorded lectures, that they need to take this class seriously and stay on top of things, because if they don't, they fall crazy far behind. And unlike, when you have, 3 classes a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you miss one thing, you can kind of make it up because there's time for it. 7 weeks, you don't have that time. So I try to make that very clear. And also, I try to make sure every time I meet with them, so the one time I've mandatorily made it a meeting, I found I need to make it worth their time. The first time I did this, I didn't. I didn't make it worth their time. I just kind of said, I'm having you connect with me so that way you know how to connect with me. And that was kind of the purpose of why I had this meeting. And I got some feedback from the students that, as busy students taking a global class, we could have figured that out if I ever needed to use that tool. Why did you do that? So I try to have some extra tips for success in the class, really to set them up on some pathways of success, and tell some stories and make it engaging, because everything they have to do for the class is really packaged into what I have to do in the 7 weeks. I try to make it very much the introductory get to know me and how do I succeed in 7 weeks. And that's what I've done to make it worth their time, and that seemed to have been better. The other thing that I found is that I need to test using the software, and I heard that at the session before I even got here. They're talking about know how the software works, and it's so important because there's going to be a person in your Collaborate session who doesn't know how to test their mic or to mute their microphone or various different things. And if you're not familiar with, hey, could you go ahead and push that mute button and tell them where it is and what that does, it creates some interesting noises and some interesting problems that come up into the Collaborate session. Or someone else, might be in the room and they're muted. They don't know how they were muted. They don't know how to make it to where they can talk. So being familiar with it, not only from the presenter's side, but also get a colleague to create a Collaborate session where they're the presenter and you go in and try to be a student and figure out, how does this work? What does it feel like to be that other person? So that way, when you are presenting and a student has a question, you can relate to them and you can answer their questions or point them into a direction that will make that session as successful as possible. The other thing that you need to make sure of, and as I put this into my slide and as a key to success, I said, this is a no-brainer. But then I recalled a time where I did not have, because of a technology problem, my headset quit working. And I tried to make do with a headset that was not of a very good quality. And it showed up. And I should have, that for me, that was kind of the lesson, that even if you're prepared, even if you're ready, if you don't think about what is the quality of the audio and the video that you're portraying, that's going to come across in your session. Thankfully for me, it was a one-on-one meeting with a fellow researcher who just, mocked me a little bit for not having good quality. But it was kind of that reminder of, yes, that is a key to success. If students have troubles hearing you, if you want them to see you and interact with you, and you don't have the ability to do that, you're going to have a hard time breaking down that barrier of making the class accessible. And the final thing that I think is important with distance classes, and it's what I try to do somewhat for myself, but I think it's also appreciated by the students, is have fun with teaching this way, much like you would in the classroom. Don't just feel like you're stuck in this one place in front of a screen, which you are, but you can still have fun while you're doing it. Like you can tell I talk with my hands, right? I do that whether I'm in front of a camera, because that's who I am. If I have jokes that I would tell in the classroom that relate to what we're talking about, I try to share those and be that way when I'm interacting with distant students, so they begin to realize that, yes, on the other side of however many miles and however many internet connections we have between us, there's a real person who's engaging with me and really is an instructor, not just a computer bot out there, taking care of this thing. So I found by being myself, having fun with the students, even in this distance setting, it helps to reduce those barriers. And using tools like Collaborate, I found, has made it even easier for me to do that. I feel in that virtual environment, I can begin to feel like it is more of a, depending on the size of the audience, an office conversation or a classroom conversation. So with that, I'll leave some time for questions. Hopefully that is helpful.
All right, questions?
Thank you so much. This is Mark over in Everett. Wow, I'm very impressed by Blackboard Collaborate. It's a tool that I haven't used, and so this was a session that I really wanted to learn from, and it. Well, Rob, like you said, make it worth make it worth my time. You made it worth my time, and Anna, I've heard great things about your communications course from another student that had taken it. So it was great to kind of meet you at least on TV. Thank you.
This is Joan in the Tri-Cities. A question I have is, I've used Collaborate a lot, but I've chosen a couple of things. I've chosen not to use the video part of it because oftentimes I have students in rural areas with bandwidth. Have you had any issues with that? And to date, I have not necessarily required, I require that they be able to listen, but not necessarily that they be able to speak. And I'm thinking about changing that to require a microphone. Again, have you had resistance to that?
For our class, we do not require a video, so we often will be on video ourselves, but we don't require that for our students. And we mainly use that feature when we're going to be talking for a period of time. If we're just guiding a conversation, we might not use it, but if we're going to be presenting information or concept, we'll use video. And for the microphone, we've always required that they be able to speak, and we haven't had any resistance with that. As far as the ability to do it, having a microphone, having a headset, those kinds of things. There's been resistance in the sense of like, oh, I don't know if I want to speak into a black space where it feels very much like there's nobody on the other end. That can be a little bit intimidating for students. And we kind of practice that with them. So like on the very first night, we have them do kind of a roll call just to test their mic to say like, yes, I'm here, I can speak. So they kind of get used to it. And then we do build up to them doing individual presentations where they are required to speak for like 2 minutes, and then we kind of just build that so that they kind of get over that initial feeling of I'm just talking into my computer, and that feels a little bit odd. Like I'm not sure there's people out there beyond me. So we structure that in the way that we do the course.
So one thing I'll say to the video part of that question, I've not run into that problem with what I've done per se, but over the years, because I've used various different technologies, I have run into that. And I had a student who was in Afghanistan once, and we had to be crazy creative because not only was he in Afghanistan, but he was on the military's network that added extra restrictions for the types of things that he could do. And one thing, maybe I should have even put this in a key to success, is to be flexible. So I've found that there are times where I have a great idea of how something's going to work, and for whatever reason, whether it's a student in Afghanistan or something went wonky, figuring out ways to adapt and be flexible to that. I've got my goal, here's what my expectation is, but I've learned I can't always have hard and fast rules because there's going to be an exception at some point in time, and I have to be okay with the fact that, we need to turn video off perhaps, or we need to do something a little different to make sure that the student still can learn today what they need to learn today.
On the technical side of things for Collaborate's video, it does have the ability for students that do have low bandwidth to dynamically lower the quality of the video and then get to the point where it will just turn it off to put the emphasis on audio, which is usually the primary thing, as well as the content, which takes up less bandwidth because it's usually a static image and not the changing video image. So it's one of those things, if you're not sure what your students' bandwidth connections are, you can still turn it on, but you might have an issue if you are expecting them to get a vital part of the experience from something you're showing on video. And that's something that if you are recording, if their internet is having issues at that point, they can at least get online later and view it or download the recording if their streaming ability is just incapable of doing it, to watch that video portion of it later. One of the tricks too, just to mention too, is that there is the ability to join as a phone participant for the audio. So if there are any bandwidth restrictions, switching over to them using a phone, if they don't have any concerns about international dialing, will take some of that bandwidth usage off of the connection to give towards the video and utilizing the phone for all the audio.
This is Joanne Dotson in Spokane. Thank you. This has really been useful. We do a lot. I'm in the nursing program. We do a lot of AMS classes, so we have multiple students usually in state, not always, participating in class. One of the things, I haven't used Blackboard Collaborate yet, and I'm just looking and playing around with it just now during the class. When, let's say you have your 30 students, if you do video, do you have videos of all of your students active up there, or is there just one active video? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, so the way that Blackboard works is just one active video. So it's the person who is speaking. So
Okay.
like in AMS, you can see everybody who's in
Right.
the conference, but in Blackboard Collaborate, it's just one person speaking. At least as far as I know. Rob may be able to answer that better.
In the newer Ultra version that they have just recently introduced, it does allow the ability to have 5 simultaneous video windows, as well as the presenter, 5 viewers, and then it will just take priority of whoever speaks most recently in the large view.
And that's the other thing I was wondering about, depending, I can see, graduate classes, and it sounds like you're able to handle a 30. Do you see that there's a point, or has anybody had experience when they kind of, like, there's just too much chatter or there's too much activity? I've been on lots of big conferences using similar technology, and sometimes it's just kind of, if there's lots of questions coming up, and that's kind of hard to keep up, but I don't know. I don't really know what I'm saying. If you find that there's greatest success with a certain number, or what. We have classes that go from 130 down to like 6. It just depends on the class.
So some of that I think comes down to management, right? As the person running the classroom, is somewhat, the management of things. I believe there is a feature where you can mute everybody, so you won't have voices popping up if you don't want to, which is a nice feature. But if I was teaching a class of well over 100 people, and I was expecting there'd be lots of questions coming in, what I would probably do is I would have my graduate assistant be my filter of said questions, and then feed them to me as, okay, this is a trend of a question, can you address those? And I've seen that done in the past. That's worked really well as a way to not get just overburdened by a bombardment of questions. But I see as the class gets larger, having a second facilitator help with those sorts of things would be something that I would probably choose to do.
That's exactly the way
useful.
we've handled it, and in the large-scale webinars we've done, we're asked there to be a specific moderator to watch the chat panel for questions, because with 100 participants, the potential of them talking over each other and then saying, wait, you go first, no, wait, you go first, is just too high. So we only give the presenters mic capabilities, and I expect everyone else to use chat.
I think an excellent example of that, it wasn't necessarily with Blackboard Collaborate, but with some of the presentations that Chef Jamie Callison has done in the School of Hospitality. He's done some actually cooking demos, and those have been guided and facilitated by a live Twitter feed. And those questions come in, and then the facilitator feeds those questions to Jamie. It's been very well done.
Okay, I think we need to wrap this session up so we can get going on our 11 o'clock session. I'm sure that Rob or either of the presenters would be happy to take questions via email. So thanks, Anna and Rob. for your participation. And we'll reconnoiter for our 11 o'clock session. We have some representatives from LoudCloud here who are going to show how that complements, supports, enhances engagement in open educational resources, OpenStax textbooks.